All right, we're just going to start in just a moment. All right, we're just going to start in just a moment. And I'm hearing myself on YouTube. Hold on. There we go. All right, let me open up the room. Hello, Lisa. Hello, Annalisa. And Anna. Welcome. We're just getting things started. If you are watching this on YouTube, best place to actually interact with us is going to ADHDrewired.com/events and just get registered to come here into the Zoom room. Got Amber who's just joining us. Welcome. And thank you for joining us. And if you have a question that you would like to ask, please put it in the little Q&A button there. And so use the chat for saying hello to everybody and use the Q&A button for asking us questions. And if you are open to going live, just put the words "go live" right in front of your question. That would help us as well. And if you are using the chat to talk amongst yourselves, make sure it says to everyone, because I think maybe by default it'll say like to panelists, which would be me and Brian. So yeah, you want to make sure you're talking to everybody. That's how you make that happen. All right, Brian, make you a co-host. And we're just gonna wait for a couple questions to come in. So please use that Q&A box. And if you have a question about ADHD, it is ADHD Awareness Month. So we're going to do our best to answer your ADHD related questions.
Whoa. Ooh, wow, that was fast.
Let's see. And Lisa, are you open to asking your question live? I think I forgot to mention the part about try to make your question as succinct and short as possible. Um, and if you're a chat GPT user, you can take your long question and copy and paste it in there and be like, all right, how do I ask this in a shorter way?
Hmm.
But thank you for the question. And so just let us know if you want to go answer your question live. That would help us. All right, let's see. All right, just waiting for maybe one or two more questions, then we will get this started.
Ooh, Drake at Massachusetts, if I know it correctly. Hello, Amber. I'm originally from Massachusetts. Hope I'm not. I'm right. That's Massachusetts, isn't it? Yep.
All right.
Oh, yes. I'm originally from Belmont, and I went to college in Amherst. So, yes, I recognize Drake it.
All right, let's see. That question that you're sitting on right now, that maybe just think like, what would somebody else want to know? And you can ask that question. Brian, how is your ADHD Awareness Month going so far? Doing anything
Well,
special?
Well, considering that I just now became aware that it's ADHD Awareness Month,
So it's going perfectly.
the last 11 seconds have been amazing.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. You know you have ADHD when? All right. All right, and I know that Kristen just messaged me. She had a client issue come up, but she's going to be joining us in just a second. All right.
And let me get this for Amber. Is it Bill? It's Bill Ricca, right? The real test is how people pronounce Worcester.
As in like the sauce, like Worcestershire sauce.
No, the city of Worcester in Massachusetts,
Oh,
which is spelled very similar to Worcestershire. And a lot of people get confused from when they're from out of state. They see the sign and they're like, wait, they named a city after that sauce? But it's just very close phonetically, like in letters, but no, it's pronounced Worcester or Worcester, depending on what part of the state you're from.
I learn something new every day.
Oh yeah, no. People think there's a Boston accent or a Massachusetts accent. There's actually about seven micro regional accents that you can only tell them apart if you grew up there.
Right on. All right. I had no idea. All right. Let me just make sure we're getting audio from both channels. All right. And I know that Chris will be joining us any moment, but let's go ahead and get started. 12:37. All right, cool. We got some questions coming that have come in. Um, and I'm gonna start with Sarah since she wants to do a go live. So I'm actually bring her up first. So let me do that, Sarah. We are in a quiet space. And so let me just
Oh, I didn't see the other
quick
question.
audio check on you first, and then I'll start out intro the podcast.
Audio, can you hear me?
Perfect. Thank you. All right, I'm gonna mute you for just a second and let me do the whole intro and everything. In three, two, and one. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. We are here during ADHD Awareness Month that Coach Brian became aware of about 35 seconds ago, and we
Mhm.
are the 8th of October. I don't know when this is going to come out, but for those of you who are here or watching this live, happy ADHD Awareness Month. Brian, how you doing?
I'm good, Eric. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
I'm happy it's ADHD Awareness Month. You didn't even get me a card. What the hell?
It's like all the other cards I intend on sending. It's a good
Yeah.
intention.
See, there you go.
All right, so we have our first question from Sarah. So Sarah, let's get you unmuted here and go ahead with your question.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Hi, Eric.
Hi.
Nice to be back in with you guys.
Yeah.
So I'd asked if you and Brian have any tips for figuring out if long-term meds that I've been on are working. Are they doing what they should? Are they still necessary? Um, and part of the reason I'm having this conversation is because I've moved recently, and so I'm going to be meeting with a new provider and would like to sort of stay with what I have, but just any suggestions around that. Like I've been taking an antidepressant and I've got a stimulant medication that I've been on for a number of years. And I know you guys aren't doctors, but
Yeah, that was the first thing I was going to
obviously.
say. We're not, we might play one on a podcast, but no, we're not doctors. Um, well, how do you think it's working?
Hmm.
Um, it's hard to tell because I'm sort of in new routines and schedules. I've just moved, I'm job hunting. Um, the antidepressant side of things, it's one of those that's hard to say. Like the first time I took it, I was like, oh, this one actually does something. But a few years down the road, it's hard to tell.
Hmm.
I guess like, with anything else, trying to ask ourselves these questions about like what is the intended goal? Like
Yeah.
what are we targeting? It's definitely, I think when we first start taking ADHD meds, that sort of wow effect can be more pronounced because it's like you didn't know any different until then, and then it's like, oh my. But then when you're on
Yeah.
it for a while, it can feel harder to really know. I think if it's like, am I at the right optimal dose?
Yeah.
I definitely, what you said, part of your question, you have recently moved, and like moving is a big deal. Like it throws off all of our routines, so
Yeah.
it taxes our executive functions big time. So I guess maybe on one hand, I would ask myself, all right, how long do I want to give myself to get sort of reacclimated to my new environment? Um,
Right.
and then at which point, how do I sort of revisit that question? Like, am I on the right dose or the optimal dose?
Right.
Um,
So I think I need to kind of reset and get myself back on a better schedule with it, getting other things, my meals and sleep and things, and getting that back closer to a schedule that's working as opposed to loosey goosey.
Right, because remember with the medication, it's that old cliche of, pills don't teach skills,
Yeah,
but they will help you use them, like when you have them. Uh,
exactly.
so yeah, I mean, I would say like use the skills that you have to try to reestablish that new
Yeah,
routine. I would encourage you when you're trying to establish that routine, to like literally write down your routine so you're not having
yeah.
to like use your memory every single day when you're trying to establish these new routines. Um, and are you consistent with taking your medication?
Um, that's part of it. I'd gotten really good with like I've got a short acting that and I would notice a difference when I was teaching that like every now and then I'm like, ooh, I did not take my noon dose and I'm feeling it right now.
Mhm.
But I haven't been consistent with sort of my midday dose and timing.
Yeah, I would probably start there then.
Yeah,
I always love the whole
schedule.
the whole notion when people are like, "Oh, those ADHD meds they're so addicting," because and then I think the best response to that, if they're so addicting, then why is it like so many people with ADHD forget to take their medication?
Yeah, yeah.
Brian,
Impossible to remember.
Said that today to someone.
Brian, go ahead.
Hi there. I'm going to concur. I'm also not a doctor, but I am going to concur with Eric based on my understanding of executive function. If you have just moved and you're in a whole new world and a whole new thing, I think that's a lot of change happening already. Maybe I would say if you have the option of continuing with your current long-term meds, so
Yeah,
you at least one of the variables in the equation stays the same while you're adapting to this new environment, may perhaps not the best time to shift out of that.
yeah.
My question is, you were prescribed an antidepressant and an ADHD med. Now, undiagnosed ADHD or poorly managed ADHD is often misdiagnosed as clinical depression.
Yes.
And doctors just want to throw an antidepressant at it because I often say, what I like to say is like, when you have unmanaged ADHD, it really affects your whole experience of navigating the world. And if you are not adapting well, that I think that could, some signs of clinical depression can be a normal and anticipated reaction to that. So,
Absolutely.
so without knowing like what your depressive symptoms are, or like how severe they were, like how do you feel you are? Where are you now with those depressive symptoms? Well, yeah, I talked about the ADHD meds and where they
Yeah.
come to work, but do you feel like the antidepressants are still helpful?
Um, it's something that I'm reevaluating. I'm sort of a long time listener. I was part of ARC 12
Hmm.
many years ago. So, and I've been on and off antidepressants. My current round on has been the last probably year or two, and I've had a lot of changes this year. I think that that's something that I want to bring up with my new doctor that I need to kind of reevaluate what's because I don't think that's being addressed enough right now, just with oh, struggles that have been going on the last year, the last 6 months. So I've I don't know. That's the thing. Like I don't know if the antidepressant is the right one. Still, like the stimulant I've been sticking with, and I think that that's helpful, especially when I'm working. But yeah, there's other stuff going on that I want to look into getting some blood work done and see what else might be feeding the procrastination and inertia.
Hmm. Gotcha.
Kristen, go
Kristen
ahead.
has one.
I have something to offer to maybe try. So as a therapist, I'm often doing check-ins like every 3 months with parents. I'm like, what are you still seeing? I have a record of, hey,
Yeah.
they did this and this and this. I'm like, okay, so at what level or intensity are they still doing this and this and this? So I'm wondering, and with you being a little disjointed anyway, I don't know if that's the right word,
Yeah.
but if you have a big whiteboard that you could put up that is in your face for a while in your new environment, and you've listed, maybe you even need to go back to the executive functions chart and go
Mhm.
through it and look and go, yeah, I have trouble with this, what your general things you have trouble with, and writing those up there, and even just as simply as giving a tick mark when you're experiencing trouble with one, just as make it as simple as you can do it to get some tracking in, because I know tracking to me is it's a
Yeah.
scary word, like for like big
It's
project
so
is for me.
helpful and yet so like sort of anti to our ADHD because it requires consistent upkeep.
Yeah.
So either put it in your face or do it, toggle it to another way that like I use notes so much on my phone that I probably could just add it into there. But
Yeah.
if I just need it in my face, I need it in my face. And maybe just looking at it each night, or just as you happen to get it. Oh yeah,
For sure.
and that way you can have your own measurable system going on, and you could separate. You could put the ones are ADHD, and put
Yeah.
these other ones that you're not sure if it's pure depression or if it's a part of the ADHD part, or if it's because your ADHD is out of control, you're feeling depressed,
Exactly.
and that way you start to get an idea of where do they fall to, what category, how do you compartmentalize them,
Yeah.
or are they
Well,
layered?
and those are some of the reminders that I need to use the things that I know are helpful. And well, showing up here today and getting
Yeah.
back to the alumni planning earlier today is part of my kick in the butt to say these are things that are helpful for me. This is community that's helpful for me. So I need to jump back into those things.
Well, I always say self-awareness is one of the first big things to work into.
Yeah.
And you are using your self-advocacy and your self-determination, because you're here today and you're stepping up and asking questions. So just maybe try to reflect back on, I need some self-awareness around this so I can answer my questions.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice. Good to hear from you, Sarah.
Yeah, you too, Chris. Nice to see you both.
And I have a follow-up I'm curious about the second part of your question. So, suggestions for getting a new provider on board with continuing my current prescriptions. Are you anticipating having difficulty persuading the doctor?
I'm hoping not. I'm in Canada and it's very
okay.
so I see bits and pieces about the huge hoops and struggles that I know my colleagues and my friends in the States have to go through. So I'm fortunate that I've got my prescription. I've got a 3-month renewal and I've got a couple months worth sitting in my drawer upstairs. However, I've just signed on. It's very, very hard to get a family doctor here. So I've just signed in with one, and I picked because they put up a sign. They're in the neighborhood and they put up a sign saying, yes, we're accepting new patients. And that's rare. So I guess I'm anticipating going in for the meet and greet and meeting somebody who doesn't believe in ADHD.
Okay.
And I don't know who I'm meeting. So I'm hoping that that's not the case. I feel like things have gotten better in the last 10 or 15 years, but
Mhm.
the psychiatrist who diagnosed me and then handed me off to GP that I've continued with treatment plans have been fantastic. But I mean, a number of years ago, I did like a mindfulness-based stress reduction program that was also run like through our provincial health and run by a psychiatrist who I can't remember exactly what he said, but who did not believe in ADHD.
Yeah,
And so I know that's
still
certainly
happens.
Yeah. I went, because I'm like, we're talking about a different country that's
Yeah.
completely outside the scope of my experience. And I don't know
For
how it is
sure.
in Canada. And I know there's a lot of variety in Canada. There's some there's a big metropolitan areas, and then there's also
Yeah.
more rural areas, and I don't know which one you're in. And that could
Yeah.
make a big difference in what healthcare is available.
I think I'm really keen to get a GP, like somebody I'm on their books, because I know that going into a walk-in clinic is not going to be a good situation.
That
Yeah.
makes sense.
We
And
should always have a DP
that's
anyway.
not like I need to have somebody like it's the sort of meds I'm on and the sort of things that I'm on are long-term things. They're stable, but they're chronic. So looking for that, I don't figuring out how to go in and present, I guess, a little bit of, hey, I've got these diagnoses and these are things I'm managing and things I want to continue with.
Sarah, can you get your records from your previous doctor? I think that's going to be a
I'm
really
hoping that, yeah,
That's what I was going to
going to
say.
get transferred.
yeah.
Gather all the records you can. I
Yeah.
bet if you got diagnosed by the psychiatrist, I mean, it can't hurt. Send them an email and say, hey, would you be willing to write me an email saying I prescribe this
Oh, that's a
because
good point.
even if they may be like, they may not answer, but there's no harm in requesting it. But gather
Yeah.
as much documentation as you want, as you can. And Christian's suggestion about doing tracking,
Yeah.
I think any provider would love to see that because it shows that you're not being passive about it. You're documenting symptoms. You can show a track record.
Absolutely.
When you can show them that you're actively involved in your care and you're thinking about it and
Yeah.
you're proactive, that probably makes that'll probably open up some doors that might have been closed otherwise.
Brian, I wanted to share, I was smiling at that because about 15 years ago, I went to a new psychiatrist, and at the time I was professionally, I was doing like applied behavioral analysis and was doing lots of like data tracking. So I was applying all that kind of stuff towards myself. So I came in with all this data on how I'm doing. And the psychiatrist was convinced I did not have ADHD because nobody with ADHD would come in with all this data and try to say you just have an anxiety disorder that you're trying to manage with all this data. So I fired him. But like,
Yeah.
so it's this sort of catch 22. All right, Kristen,
And
quick comment
I've-
and go to the next question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
When Brian was suggesting gathering all your records, and Eric did too, I heard you, I don't even know if they caught it. I heard you say, yeah, I'm looking to get them transferred. I would suggest making sure you have your own zip drive in your hands, because I don't trust those transfers most of the time. They don't get done soon enough. They might say there were a lot. If you're going to that old office and you're saying, I want my stuff, when you've got it in your hands. And
that's a good point too.
I don't know about Canada, but I'd be surprised if you weren't allowed by law to request your medical records.
Yeah.
And that's how I got diagnosed. I got diagnosed initially when I was in college by the disability accommodations office, and then I forgot about it and I sat on it for a very long time until I started taking it seriously again. And then when I had to get back into a new health insurer, I had to get them on board with prescribing me ADHD meds, and thank goodness. I mean, I'm dating myself. The original copy of that report was not digital. I had it on paper and almost 20-year-old records that were sitting in a drawer at my mom's house. If I hadn't had that document, it would have been so much harder. So yeah, I'd say gather your own, put the request and scan them in, put them in your G drive, have them on hand just for all future references.
For sure.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Sarah, thank you so much for your question. All right, we got a couple other questions here. I just want to remind everyone who is here, if you want to talk to us just like Sarah did, please put go live in your question. All right, we have a little bit of a longer question. Brian, do you want to read this one?
Which one are you looking at?
Lisa's. It was the first question that came in.
Oh, you want me to read it?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. Because when I read out loud, my brain does not process anything I read.
Okay, fine. I was late diagnosed with ADHD in combination. I'm 58 years old. I truly thank you all for the ADHD reWired programs and podcasts. It's truly helped me understand how I was missing out for years, and my past actions are now a complete aha moments. However, with all the listening to the podcast, I feel I've been hyperdrive with my time blindness. It has just intensified greatly, and the same for my forgetfulness. I've always known I have a learning disability, but after learning more and waiting to find a way to be 100% tested for dyslexia. You all talk about writing diaries, setting priorities and goals. I'm so lost on where to get started. I guess I've always been able to fake it to make it. ADHD has in the last few years also stressed my marriage, and after learning about my ADHD, my husband won't listen nor help. So I'm totally navigating everything on my own. Yes, I do have a great therapist who's working with me, but it's tough. My comfort spots is pet grooming and art. Any help will be helpful.
Thanks for reading that, Brian. All right, so there's a lot there. And so Lisa, first, you are welcome for the podcast and everything else that we do. Appreciate those kind words. Okay, so where do we get started? I mean, it's start small. Like in our so this is kind of this balance of working through the what does it mean and the acceptance piece of having ADHD and experiencing some of the grief. You said you're late diagnosed. There's grief of all that time that you don't get to get back, of like, you struggled, your whole life with not knowing that, oh, this was the issue. And that's a real grief that I think is so important that we acknowledge. But I also want to encourage you not to get stuck there, because that's, grief is good when you're mourning it in a kind of proactive way. You're sort of frustrated or sad about like how was this missed? This is so hard. Why is this harder for me? Right. So it's all those sort of grief kinds of related questions. But then really like starting small, right? I think that I'm a big fan of helping people learn to identify their time blindness as a building block skill. Because it's all the calendaring that we could do, all of the to-do lists and setting goals that we can do. If we don't know how long things actually take us and what that sort of difference is between what our gut tells us and what the reality of it actually is, because like there's a pretty reliable difference there, and it requires tracking it, making predictions on how long you think something will take you, and then actually setting that timer. And one of the biggest challenges there is to, if you do remember to set the timer, then also remembering to stop the timer so you can record how long this task actually took you. But if you're thinking that like, oh, there's so many things I can time, where should I start? I encourage on your routine type activities, because those are repeated things that you can repeat several times to get some reliability in that. But I do think that is probably the best place to start when you're looking at skill building. Brian?
I'll concur with Eric about starting with observation of how long things actually take you versus how long you think they should take you. Our judgy friend should, because that is almost always, when we say should, it's almost always based on expectations of things we've observed of other people who are more likely to be neurotypical. So we're putting ourselves to an unfair standard. So if you're going to do any tracking, start with a judgment-free, as much as possible, observation of how long it actually takes you. Like, oh, I want to wash the dishes and put them away. That should take 10 minutes, but it takes me half an hour. Let's just cross out the first part of that sentence. It takes you half an hour, and without judgment. So I put there, but what I really, I will also concur with Eric's point about starting small and gentle. I really appreciate that at the end of your question, you added in what your comfort spots are: pet grooming and art. And I think any ADHD management system should have joy in it. Making time for things that you enjoy, make pet grooming or appreciating art or whatever your art related activity is, make that part of your daily routine so you're getting those dopamine hits from the pleasurable activities. We have to have something joyous that lifts us up. ADHD is a deficit of or difference in our brains about the way we process dopamine. We don't process it as well. We don't reuptake it as well. So I always say, like, anytime you start off with like, many people starting their ADHD journey say, I'm going to get serious. I'm going to start time tracking every day. I'm going to start using calendars, but it's all like, not the not fun stuff, the serious adult responsible adulting stuff. I always say anytime you're designing an approach to managing ADHD, it should combine things that you're passionate about, things that you enjoy, things that rejuvenate you, and kind of put energy back in your cup. Because if you do those things consistently, that's one of the best ways to improve ADHD management overall. So I don't have an answer for you about a specific system that you could use, but I would say any system that you do design, make sure it includes those joyous activities on a regular basis. It could even be a reward or a gamifying thing. It's like, oh, if I'm gonna reward myself by going to the museum to check out that exhibit if I get all my stuff done this week. That being said, if you don't get your stuff done that week, still go to the exhibit. You still deserve that, that good stuff in your life. But making that a part of your approach to life, like, it can't all be buckling down and white knuckling it through productivity tools. It also has to be designing a truly joyous and fulfilling life.
And Lisa, I'm super glad you're here too. I think another piece of this too is find your community and engage with the ADHD community. I think it is so easy to sort of put all the blame on ourselves when we aren't with other people who kind of, do things that we tend to do, right? So, Brian, you want to add to that?
We've been conditioned our whole lives to put the blame on ourselves by even by well-intentioned people who just don't understand what ADHD is because it's not a visible uh I'm going to use the D word, controversial, but it's not a visible disability. So many of the people around us don't understand it, which kind of I see Kristen's hand, but I think we really want to address the second part about your relationship with your husband, which I'm very sorry to hear about. This is something we hear a lot about, especially when people in longer term relationships begin an ADHD journey because they're saying, I don't know what the situation is. I'm not going to try and speculate, but many times, people like in a long term relationship, they're comfortable with their partner. And when you say, oh, I'm actually something different, I'm going to start doing things differently, that can be intimidating to your partner. And I don't know what the case with it may not actually be about someone believing or having a hardline belief that ADHD doesn't exist, or I don't think this is really ADHD. I just think you are using that as an excuse. Not in your case, I've heard this from many other people. It may just be that they are not comfortable with the change. So it's something that can be, worked out slowly over time. But even, if we're going to allow our compassion for ourselves, even if our partner or whoever is in our lives that is kind of not cooperating is being a turd. My afraid kind of being a turd because I've stole that from Therapy Jeff, by the way. He uses that phrase all the time, and now it's in my head. By the way, for relationship issues, check out Therapy Jeff on Instagram and Facebook. He's great. He talks a lot about emotionally anxious and avoidant attachment styles, but a lot of really good lessons in there for ADHD folks too. But yeah, just keep in mind, try to see it from, even if they're being kind of a turd, try to understand their point of view as much as you can. They might just be feeling insecure because I don't know what this is. Things are changing in my long-term relationship that I'm very comfortable in. So that doesn't make it okay for them not to support you, but your efforts to work with them might be more effective if you try to see it from their point of view.
Kristen, anything to add to that
Yeah,
one?
sorry about the hand, Brian. I did raise it, but then I just sort of sat there. And I was just like sitting there playing with my nails. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for that to be distracting. So one of the approaches I take is this frame of mind thing and reframing our thoughts. And you were talking about like getting from the get-go. So my best way to describe this is my example. And if you're out there and have been through my course with Eric's program, you know this example. I hate water. And I was making health changes, and so I was trying to increase my water intake. And so the very first subtask I had on my breakdown of my goal was to think about drinking water every day. And I would give myself a win just because the minute I would look at my, checklist of things I was doing, I was like, oh yeah, I got to think about drinking water. It's okay. I can drink water. I had the visual cue already there because I had a list of things to do and I would put it on the list every day. And it has really helped. So I like to use any of the strategies I'm wanting to put in place and make the goals around learning those new habits. I have a couple of clients that we post top threes. There's one of our pages or our spaces on Mighty Network where we can still post daily top threes. And her number one, every time she manages to get in there and post it that day, is post my top three here. And so she gets to immediately put a check. So she gets a win as soon as she posts. And so I think sometimes using them as kind of quick wins can be really helpful. And it's the one thing you want to be thinking about is how can I create these new systems or new routines or new just a habit. And that way you see it and you do it, and you're learning to make lists, you're learning to set a goal, you're learning to rethink about it. And so that's just an idea for anybody out there with any of these kind of things. I just think it's been a very, very helpful way for something that you find resistance towards too.
Now, I want to kind of comment on something that I think is really important. I always try to mention this to my coaching groups at the start of our each season is that if you live in a family, right? So whether it's you and a partner, whether you have kid, like communicating that you're going to be doing something that you're trying to do things that are going to be different. And when you are doing something different within a system, and a family is a system, like the system is going to kind of go, whoa, what is happening? Because systems like homeostasis, even if it's dysfunctional, it's still like homeostasis, right? So anything that is a change to that system, the system's going to notice. So if you can almost get ahead of it and normalize what that experience is, they, hey, this is a new piece of information for me. I am learning. I understand this, like maybe feels different or you're not uncertain. That is okay to feel that way. I'm feeling that way too. What I'm hoping is you can support my learning and ask me questions if you have questions. All right.
And
All right.
actually, that's one thing. Just
Right.
when approaching those situations, when you're working with a partner, consider asking questions. Approaching it from a question-based point is always a great way to communicate. Sometimes we want to make declarative statements, which we are important when we form boundaries. Like, this is important to me because I'm trying to do this, and this is what it means. But if you get pushback, ask them questions about their pushback. Ask them, why does it bother you? What is the
Yeah.
difference? And a lot of times, if you get them talking, it will start that they'll have to process. They might be reacting to something that they're afraid of. That might be something that they feel uncomfortable because the system is changing, which is what I was, Eric explained it much more eloquently than I did what I was getting at. Like, if you ask them questions and get them talking about it, they have to process the information a different way. So try to always incorporate question asking as opposed to just making statements, but do both, but make sure the questions are in there.
Well, and that brings up, you talked about that fear element of changes. I don't want the change. I got the sense of, oh my gosh, what am I going to have to do to help with this? And that sense of more piled on my plate, and that could be what it is they're thinking you're about to ask me to do a whole bunch of things that they may just need to know how you hope they can support you.
If I
Right.
could make a book recommendation, the book "Change Your Questions, Change Your Life."
Yeah. I'm
I've
a while.
one of the few books that I've read more than read all the way through once even, but reread multiple times.
Nice. Nice. Okay, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we have some more questions. So we will be right back. All right, for those who are watching on YouTube or here right now, just so you'll know, our fall coaching season starts on Thursday. We are full with a wait list, which is lovely. So keep your eyes out for our next season. And I'm going to be taking a little bit of I'm extending the breaks in between seasons because after 10 years of doing this, I'm realizing having a 2-week break in between is not sustainable because I have about 20 more years of work ahead of me. So I got to make sure that I am staying fresh and energized and watching that burnout. And if you are spinning your wheels and you're like, oh, I have these things I need to do, but I'm not getting it done, you can always jump into our adult study hall co-working community at adultstudyhall.com. Okay. I think that Gerald, who promoted Gerald? I just want to make sure that that was one of you. Brian, did you do that?
I did not.
Oh,
At least
bad.
not on at least not on purpose.
Okay, I'm gonna just remove that. That was potentially almost an interesting Zoom bomb. It's been a while since I've had one of those. Those
I
are always.
didn't. I maybe I could have pressed a button, but I don't think I did.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's and for those who have asked questions already, if you want to go live, just let us know that. But let's transition back in. And we are back. All right. So we're going to be answering another question here. We have our question from, I think it's Annalisa. And so Annalisa wants to know, see, I'm just at the beginning of my journey and I started on meds, slow release, 20 milligrams, second week now. And my brain is struggling to prioritize and to start things. I'm trying calendar and colored paper to try to remember the order of things so I can get a routine after burnout in April. Is it is it how it's supposed to be? Also more forgetful than ever. Okay. So I'm processing the question. As I mentioned in the previous question, I don't process while I'm reading things out loud. So maybe Brian or Kristen, you want to jump in while I reread this question to myself?
I am looking it over. So, Annalisa, would it be correct to summarize as saying you feel like your ADHD symptoms have increased or become more pronounced in the, what, 2 weeks that you've been taking meds?
And Annalisa go live. Let me bring Annalisa.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were.
Yep. We're good. I just put that in the chat. So, okay. Annalisa, hello.
Hello, how are you doing? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, perfect. Thanks so much for this channel. Oh my God, this is my first one.
Awesome.
So brilliant. I've just found you on one of those YouTube channels that I'm watching loads. I'm starting to understand about the ADHD. Like I didn't get a full assessment, a diagnosis. I'm in Ireland. And I'm just struggling to understand how it works. I'm going to see my psychiatrist again next week. I can kind of structure-ish, not much, my mornings. Like I'm writing down in color papers just to remember to brush the teeth, and there's just trying to build a structure, like a skeleton structure for the routine. Because my house, I need to organize everything, absolutely everything. I'm not working, no family here, so I have, I'd say, time. I just need to go, like, I'm trying different calendars to see what it sticks, like different colors and different methods. But I conquered it yesterday, but today I just got focused on something tangent and got lost.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm feeling more forgetful overall.
So I'm curious. So you mentioned that you're feeling more forgetful. Is it possible that you're actually just noticing more that you're forgetting things and that you're actually not any more forgetful than you were?
That's what I thought. That's what I've been thinking. Well, another thing that I've been doing is I am recording on my watch every single thing that comes to my mind and how I'm feeling. And every time that I get things that I don't know, maybe it's like I'm observing more, that's for sure. I'm more aware.
That's
I'm doing
great.
meditation. I have psychotherapist twice a week, and I'm doing the work.
It sounds
I
like you're doing the very ADHD, like beginning of sort of managing its thing, where it's like you dive deep and it's what you're thinking about all the time and learning about these different things and trying different strategies. Um, Learning about ADHD is an incredibly important part of managing ADHD, learning the science of
Mhm.
ADHD, because it is the degree of sort of this internalized shame that so many of us with ADHD, especially if like diagnosed, have sort of taken on is huge. And I think it's extremely important to really get a new, accurate set of facts about ADHD, and sort of start shifting that story that you're telling yourself about what it means to have ADHD. Now, as far as like all the skills and everything, there's a couple of things that you mentioned that I think are great. One, you're experimenting, and that is like, to me, that's probably the number one thing to do. Like, if I were to wave a wand, a blanket statement, what should you do with your ADHD? Experiment, right? Because that's what's going to help you figure out the strategies that really stick. Because there are so many things I've done throughout my life to help manage my ADHD, and it required a lot of experimentation and continues to. I'm continuously having to iterate and tweak, and we'll find we'll find a calendar that we just love, and then that calendar stops getting made,
Mm.
right? Or we have a to-do list app that's working so well for us for like a month, and then we suddenly stop paying attention to it, right? And so it's like understanding that a lot of these things happen is very normal as part of ADHD. And so whatever tool you're using, if you stop using it, doesn't mean the tool stops working. It means you have ADHD and your brain kind of went somewhere else and got bored of it, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to calendaring, now it sounds like you're a paper calendar person.
I I try different notebooks. I
Okay.
suppose. But it didn't, like, I always planned to start a bullet journal or something to help me just keep motivated, but I'd never started it.
Okay.
But now I'm like transitioning to Google Calendar, and I have another different ones. I'm just trying to see whatever it's easier and simple and at the same time dynamic. And I'm listening to loads of podcasts like Andrew Huberman and also on neuroscience. I love it because I got diagnosed on autism February this year. So that's the kind of level 1, which made a lot of sense. But the ADHD is definitely the thing that was missed on the diagnosis. And now the psychiatrist prescribed without me saying much, just lack of focus, and the focus and the house absolutely cluttered.
Mm.
I don't know where to start. Is there any app that you guys know, anybody know, that is kind of calendar / tasks, but it works like a game?
A game.
Well, first I Googled that, Annalisa, and I'm just kind of looking through what they offer. And there is a top 10 aesthetic ADHD planning apps. Maybe Google and see this list. Some of them
Brilliant.
have that color. None of them really have game like to it, because I got excited because I'm very much a gamifier.
There are to-do
Yeah.
apps that gamify. Like
okay, so there might be that. But what I wanted to offer before I forget this thought is the noticing piece. You know, it's kind of like you get a new car and it's like, then you see that car everywhere. Oh, everybody has my car, you know.
Yes.
I would want to encourage you to notice the strengths of yourself. I don't want to coin it as it's an ADHD strength, but notice the strengths of yourself too, and the things that you win at. We can really drown ourselves with that grief and that frustration and kind of shutdown mode as we begin to notice the things without even trying. And they're all the negative pieces, because it's the diagnosable pieces, which give us direction, which that's what we want the diagnosis for, is to give us some direction. But then what helps kind of soften some of the shame that comes with it is all those strengths too that can come with it. The ability to be amazing idea generators, problem solvers. We think outside the box, where we're quick in I'm saying things that are generally, but they don't match everybody. We're quick in a crisis. We like that feeling, or we're really good at talking to people. We don't have, some of us are, you know, we have social, depends on what they are. But I just wanted to encourage that, because I don't want you to get drowning in the grief that comes with noticing all the hard things.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And speaking of strengths, I wanted to take a moment to celebrate all the great things that I've heard in your question and what you've been speaking to, all the things that you are doing. You're working on calendaring systems, you're using colored paper, you're recording things on your watch, which I think sounds so cool. You're recording those negative thoughts on your watch. Great.
Yep.
And you're getting diagnoses, you're working with a therapist, like you're crushing it. Like people say, oh, what do I have to do to become successful at ADHD management? I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think you're already successful at ADHD management because you're doing all this stuff. You can't really control ADHD, but you can control how you adapt to it. I think you're doing a fantastic job. And we always make a big deal about celebrating wins here at ADHD. So I just wanted to call that out at the beginning. But I'm going to kind of piggyback off of Eric's point about being aware that there's going to be ups and downs. Many folks, when they jump into an ADHD management program, we get very excited, we get new systems, and then we might leave the door open to burnout a little bit. And then when they do it, well, we do it for hardcore for a month and then it falls off. And it's very easy to fall into that shame trap of like, oh, here's another thing that I did that I didn't follow through on, or fell to the side and I forgot about it. And the real key is to have a resiliency to pick it back up. There's two kinds of there's a thing known as looking for the right words, but the difference between a process goal and a outcome goal. If you're familiar with those ideas, an outcome goal is like a specific thing. I want to get this report done by this date, or I want to if it's a health goal, I want to lose this amount of pounds by in this many months or something like that. Whereas a process goal does not have a specific outcome or a date. It's I develop a process for how to approach this that I do repetitively, and then the desired outcomes will take care of themselves in time. It's kind of like an algorithm, like just processing data over and over until you reach the answer. So the thinking of it as a process as opposed to an outcome goal, like, oh, I'm going to work really hard for 6 months and then my ADHD will be solved. Not a very realistic outcome there, but designing a process that's going to keep working over time with ups and downs, falling, our systems falling apart and then picking them up again over time. Thinking about it that way will ultimately, in my opinion, yield much, much greater results.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you. It was comforting to hear. And I'm trying to be more compassionate to myself. Like I've tried different systems before starting the medication, and I didn't know that I had ADHD. None of them worked, and I just started all over after a period of time. And I think the anxiety is just taking the best out of me, and then I just need to chill out and relax and watch a movie.
Okay.
Oh God.
Something else to think about too. It's not just about like what you can do to create these different sort of systems and strategies, but also asking yourself like, how is your environment making things harder? And are there things that you can do to actually change your environment to be more conducive for what your brain needs? Now, Kristen suggested Googling stuff for gamified apps. I did the next level of Googling, that's Chat GPT. And so I want to share with you what Chat GPT suggested when I asked for gamified calendar or to-do apps. So one I've heard of before is Habitica. It's an app that turns life into a role-playing game. You earn points and unlock achievements, gain rewards. Now I have used it a little bit a number of years ago. I didn't love the interface, but that's just me. I know people that also love this app. Another one that I have not heard of is Todoist Karma. Todoist has a built-in gamification feature called Karma, where you gain points by completing tasks on time and using advanced features like labels and recurring tasks. It also tracks your productivity trends over time. There's another one called Trello plus ButlerBot. So Trello is a flexible project management tool that you can gamify by using ButlerBot for automation. You can create your own rules for rewards when you complete tasks or achieve milestones. And so there's other ones out there too. So that's a place to get started. So I hope that is helpful for you, and welcome to the neurodivergent family.
Thank you so much. How did you look that up? So I just take notes. It's Trello.
So I'll try to put that in the chat here in a moment. But
Lovely.
I searched for it using Chat GPT.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Welcome. All right.
Thank you, guys. You're brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thanks. All right. Let's go to our next question here. All right. Stacy asks, what's a good way to navigate transitions? After I left the house for a certain amount of time to do errands, etc., it's near impossible to get back into productivity in the house. I need to sit and do nothing for a while before having hope to resume tasks. I just relate to this one profoundly because transitions are probably my biggest ADHD challenge. So good ways to navigate transitions. I think one way you could do it is what I like to call giving yourself shirt space. And so SHART is an acronym that I came up with. That we don't probably know what a SHART is. It's it's a little unexpected. So SHART space on your calendar stands for shit happens, adjustment, recovery time. So if you know that you need some time after like being out doing errands to kind of just sit and stare at the wall for a while, can you plan for that? So you're not just beating yourself up because you can't reactivate the moment you step back into your environment to work again. I think sometimes we underestimate the impact on our nervous system of doing things like errands. Or like if for me, like 1 or 2 errands and I'm done. Like I'm fried. Right? So I totally get that. Looking at different times of day for transitions. Are there different things that you can do to make transitions easier? Like for me, like I transition easier when I know I have my son with me, because it's not just me that is dependent on me staying on track, right? So that's like a little thing. Or like if I have to pick up my son from in the evening because he's with me that day, or way I get out of the office, I get stuck here sometimes. It's I call it the burrito bowl intervention. It's where I use the Chipotle app to order food and have it be picked up in 10 minutes. I don't want cold food. So as soon as I made that order, that now creates urgency for me to pack up my stuff, go get my food, and then carry on with my evening. Brian and Kristen, what are your ideas for making transitions easier? Chirp, chirp.
Oh, I thought of something right then, but Brian, you unmuted.
Shoot.
Think of things in terms of I've been a dancer all my life. And so one of the things that I'm still working on transitions, but when I lean into this and think about it, is having that closing moment. Like when you take a ballet class, if you take a very, if they do it the way it's supposed to happen, you have this, it's a progression of movements to help you be the best movable, learn in the best way. And then there's this ending component. There's this cool down. You might get it with like exercise systems too, where they say it's the cool down. We have a reverence. And it's to show that it's bookmarking the end of that class. Recognizing what helps you with cutting off. I am a brick and mortar walk through the portal. I go into the room. Oh, it's time for this. And I'm able to blank everything out. And then when the clock says this and we do the reverence, because that's part of a routine that says ending. It tells my body it's ending. Then I can walk out of that and then my brain can go scatter again. Zoom has helped because I treat it like the brick and mortar portal too. So I do that. But that's probably the biggest thing that I lean into is the idea of even at home, if I need to stop doing something, I need to get up and walk out of that room and go someplace else. But that's something that's because I know that I'm very kinesthetic in function.
That is interesting, Chris. It makes me kind of think about the differences between sort of transitioning like mindset versus transitioning our actual body, like in a physical space. And I think that there's nuances to how those transitions work for each of those things. For the body, it's like, can you actually do something that forces you to get up? Right, Brian?
I will piggyback on Eric's idea about creating urgency, which is what you described with like your trick with ordering the Chipotle and whatnot. There's also finding the existing structure in your day and working around it. I don't know what that is for you personally, but a lot of times if there's stuff going on in your environment, like for example, a lot of people that we've worked with in our coaching program who are parents, kids going to and from school is a built-in transition. Pets needing to be walked is a built-in transition. Things need to be done. Like if you have to go to a appointment at a regular time regularly. I was working with a client in one of our coaching programs a few seasons ago. Said, I know she worked from home. She had her own business. And she says, I just can't keep track of what I do during my day. And so I said, what happens in your day on a regular basis that you are already accustomed with? And can we use that to build transitions off of? And she had very specific dietary requirements. So she had to pay attention to when breakfast, lunch, and dinner were. And I'm like, okay, so now let's divide your day into after breakfast and before lunch, after lunch, before dinner, and she was like, oh, and it was a light bulb went off, and that was like the basis of beginning a transition and end. So like we call that what we call the checkpoints in our coaching program, finding checkpoints that exist naturally in your day. Like if you have to go out at a certain time, just putting some intention into it. Like, okay, I'm going to do my chores before that, so I only have an hour. I'm going to start an hour before I know I have to go somewhere. So that way I am like letterboxed into 1 hour. That can be a very successful technique or tool for some folks.
So look, any time you could front load the planning and preparation of a task, especially if you know it's a maybe non-preferred task, if you can make the actual getting into that task or activity easier, that's going to help. So using maybe laundry for an example. So you're out, you have to go do chores and you have to do laundry. By the time you get home, do you really want to do laundry? Probably not. You're tired. But what if you brought your laundry and dump it out right by the laundry room, right? You now just made it easier to start it, right? Or even start it before you go, and then like you got to change it. Just leave a note for yourself, otherwise you may have to rewash your clothes.
Eric,
Yeah.
totally did that the other day because I know if I take my laundry and put it in the kitchen, which is right by our laundry room, at some point, Gary discovers that's been living there. That is not in a holding pattern. And he comes and goes, why is your dirty laundry in the kitchen? And I never want to hear that. It's like a reverse accountability. It's like, I don't want to hear why is the laundry in the kitchen? Because he's not getting on to me. He's just going, kind of hard to walk around up there and get in the cabinet. So that helps that's one way it helps remind me to change it from the washer to the dryer. I try to wait for at least 2 loads so I can do that, because then when I take it out of the dryer, that's my cue to take the washer into the dryer. So that has been helpful. But yeah, I totally did that. Dropped it right in the way, because then it's in the way and you got to move it. And it does make it easier. And I did do that the other night when I was really tired because it was already right there. So I love that tip.
All right. I think we have one more question here. And I want to just thank Annalisa because you've asked a bunch of great questions for this Q&A. So thank you. Annalisa says, how do I know when to be flexible or when to push in order to rewire the brain regarding the small starting steps of rebuilding a routine? You know, it's interesting, this sort of like dance between flexibility and rigidity around routine. Because I think that to a certain degree, when we're trying to build a routine, we do want to kind of try to have some rigidness around that. Because otherwise I feel like in some ways the rigidness can be almost considered an overcorrection approach to the very flexible brain of, oh, I'm going to do this thing. Well, I don't really feel like doing it. I mean, I'll try again tomorrow. Right. Like, which, if that's like the tendency, putting in things in place that will really help sort of counter that tendency can be really helpful. Anytime we're dealing with a routine, and I look at a routine as a sequence of a bunch of different sort of steps, right? Don't try to have to use your brain for all of it. Like, write out the routine and try to follow that that list. It's like a pilot, right? Doesn't matter how many flights that they've flown, right? They have their checklist every single flight, right? It's amazing that it still is an issue with like surgeons, that they have too much of an ego apparently to have that checklist, but we know it would save lives because those places that do that actually have better outcomes. So yeah, using that kind of a sequence or a list, you can even put it on like a clock, and you can mark your clock based on the different activities you're trying to do in that routine. Kristen.
My mind goes to the that question, what's one thing I can do such that by doing it makes everything easier or unnecessary?
That's the focusing question from the book, The One Thing.
And then the first step, it maybe change if push sounds negative, change that language. What's my starting block action step? Whatever you want to call it, change that language to make it more fun. My belief, at least for me, is I've got to do the first thing, and then the mind kind of takes over and it goes ahead and starts doing these things, especially if I have the checklist, because it felt like 2 questions there. It felt like all these steps, and that felt like the overwhelming piece. And then that, do I remain flexible or do I push? The push, I think, is just in the getting started piece, because yes, and maybe having the plan B, if this then that, because the flexibility could be like Brian mentioned, checkpoints. I get to a checkpoint in my morning routine, I'm behind. Oh, I don't get to curl my hair. So this is a different set of steps. This is throw ponytail and go, because I don't get to do all those extra things that's part of my routine. So
Kristen, I
having
can't relate to your analogy of putting your hair in a ponytail. I'm sorry.
Do what?
I can't relate to your analogy.
Okay, sorry. We have more stuff to do in the morning.
For those who have never seen what I look like, that was a self-deprecating bald joke because I don't have hair on top of my head.
And you used to have dreads, so that, if I get that right, you didn't have to do a lot then in the
I
morning.
mean, that was 25 years ago. Oh man.
But maybe it's that I don't get to have a cooked breakfast. I have to have a piece of toast.
There you go.
If you want to go there with a lot of different varieties. So the if this then that can be helpful, because then you are being flexible still with a plan. Maybe the easy plan.
That kind of reminds me of I'm trying to remember who it was I heard this from. It was from a CHAD conference. And they were talking about the importance for helping people who wear makeup to have like 3 different versions of that makeup routine, like the 3 to 5 minute quick version, the 10 to 15 kind of everyday version, and then like going out, getting all dressed up like the much longer version.
I have
And
that with the shower too.
yeah.
I have both.
So yeah, I think flexibility in those kind of regards in those domains does make sense. I think it's if you have a tendency to have more of that sort of all or nothing thinking, it can be really easy to say, oh, well, I know this thing takes me half an hour and I don't have half an hour, so I can't do it at all. It's like, well,
And not just takes me and I don't have it, takes me and I'm not feeling it. I have leaned into the shower when I say, wash the necessary parts and get the hell out. I still get in the shower because, with ADHD and the depression thing, there are times that we don't want to do the hygiene. I'm just going to open that door because it is a can of worms and it can be very hard. Zoom made it even harder to want to do it because you can't smell me today. So that's good, but having that has really helped me go ahead and lean into. I have some sensory issues around getting under the shower thing too. Once I'm in there, I'm good. But sometimes once I'm in there too long. And that was an issue. We're talking about transitions. There's another, so having 3 different plans helps me with the transition piece and the being flexible. Yeah.
all right. I think that is all the time we have. I want to thank you for being here once again this month. And I'm hoping that we're going to get these podcasts out on a more regular basis fairly soon. I have a couple of people I'm actually talking with to hire a new editor. So hopefully we'll be getting these out soon because I know it's been a while. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy your ADHD Awareness Month. And maybe, just maybe, we'll see you next month in November at the CHAD conference, the ADHD conference that is happening in November. So I will hope to see you there. Kristen, Brian, thank you as always. We will see you next time.